So that makes us live.
All right.
And
First item is review minutes of 12/21/21. Any comments to get us kicked off? Everybody? That was a very thorough description of what happened. Then a motion?
I move
I'll
to
move
approve the minutes.
Second.
Second. All in favor? Jay, you want to run us through?
yes, right. Thank you for
Video.
the reminder. Let's see. Alan,
Approved.
Mr. Gates,
Approve.
Don. No, Don, you're sorry. You're not. You're. Yep. My mistake. Peter,
Approved.
Dave,
Approved.
and Rick.
Approved.
All right.
Second item, review of utility scale solar provisions.
So
We have a
Jamie,
guest today.
Jamie's going to run with this one for us. So for those who haven't yet met Jamie, she's our sustainability coordinator. And I think that's all I'll do for an intro and let Jamie go.
Why, thank you, Jay. So thank you all for making room on today's agenda to go over this item. It was about a year ago that this concept was first introduced to this committee, and the Sustainability Committee and I have been working on it since prior to that, and we appreciate your feedback and referenced it as we moved forward developing the draft language that you received prior to the meeting. And as you may know, solar development in Maine has increased significantly since some favorable legislation passed in 2019. And staff receive phone calls or emails on a weekly basis from both landowners and solar developers who are wishing to work in Scarborough. So, and we're also aware of 3 projects that are in development in Scarborough. And the planning board just endorsed a municipal project for a large scale solar array on EcoMain's municipal use on EcoMain's Asheville site in town. So the time is right for us to take a look at this and consider updating our ordinances to allow this type of development. So I hope you've had a chance to review the draft language that was provided, but I can just give you a quick overview. So we're calling this utility scale solar, which means that it's not an accessory unit to an existing development. It's basically a standalone development that is directly connected to the grid and its only purpose is to generate electricity and send it to the grid. As opposed to the what you may be familiar with at like Hospice of Maine on Route 1, they have an array for their building. They are allowed to send additional or excess energy to the grid, but they're using it on site first. So that's kind of the nuance here. The language that was provided is targeting this type of development in industrial, light industrial, rural farming, and rural residence farming and manufactured housing districts. And that's largely because that's where the land area is, especially in our RF zone. We are looking at, the scale of this, these solar arrays will be probably from 1 to just under 5 megawatts. 1 megawatt needs approximately 5 acres of land. So we are talking about larger parcels, and the projects that we're aware of that are interested in coming into Scarborough are on some agricultural lands and also the old, Jay, you can correct me if I'm wrong, the Kimberly Clark landfill. They're interested in doing something there as well. So my memo kind of outlined part of our reasoning for this. I know that there was concern about the proximity to infrastructure in some of these zones, and we're aware that CMP is upgrading some of their electrical grid out on county roads, so in the more rural area of town, because of projects that are going in Gorham. So the landscape's changing, and so I think that allowing these in areas even where infrastructure may not be currently, it seems like infrastructure is changing on a regular basis because of these projects that are going in. And we've also spoken with solar developers to see how close they need to be to the necessary infrastructure. And they said typically within 2 miles, but depending on other site conditions, they've gone up to 4 miles to run their lines to the electrical grid in order to connect in. So lots of different things to consider for developers as they are working on their projects. But number one is finding, the right type of land with a proximity to infrastructure. And as we know that there are projects in the plans in Scarborough, it seems like there are some areas that are applicable for this. So I'm definitely interested to hear your feedback and what questions and concerns you have. The Sustainability Committee is really interested in seeing this move forward. So again, thank you for taking the time today to chat about it a bit.
Yeah, and Dave, I might just add just a little thoughts from sort of the land use perspective that, we'll be thinking about in addition to all these other things. And just as we think about, and I know we talked about this last time, and again, it's been about a year, really taking a look, thinking, there's sort of a difference between the RF, RFM, and the industrial, light industrial. I think from a zoning land use perspective, some of the thoughts we had talked about previously is, within the RF, this, in addition to, all the benefits it could bring for energy supply, could be another land use alternative for a property owner who's looking to get some value out of their property without necessarily having to develop it with rooftops, which is frankly in the RF outside of farming, really the way we see that happen, right? That we grow houses. So this might be an opportunity for someone to do that with having minimal impact on the landscape and preserving some of that rural character we talk about. And then in the light industrial district, I remember last time we talked a bit about, we don't have a ton of that land area, and that land area is really, one of our economic drivers, where we can try to build our tax base with buildings and infrastructure, as well as create jobs. And so thinking about, are there opportunities to what would be the right word I'm looking for? Find some opportunities in sort of where the excess land, if you will, where someone might have a large, stormwater system that they could potentially put some of these arrays or what have you. So I know that was one of the items we talked about, in addition to, as Jamie already talked about, sort of, I think, there were some thoughts around, well, if we're talking about the RF, how far are these industries willing to extend three-phase power, right? And where is three-phase power in town? And that is, as Jamie said, and just to repeat, we've had some discussions with the folks in the industry, and really it depends on their site characteristics. Some sites, they may have very low site work that needs to be done, so they have more funds they can put towards bringing three-phase. As Jamie said, there's a project where they're running it a few miles, so it really, we couldn't sort of pin that down to say, one distance or another. It's really going to be site dependent. So I'll be quiet there and see where we go.
Can I ask a question off the bat? How is this taxed? How is this from the town's perspective? How is it treated?
I have not asked the assessor that question as of yet, but I would imagine the value of the utility, the infrastructure would be taxed, and then I don't know what sort of assessor's value they would put to it, right? They have sort of these residential, commercial, so I don't know where exactly that would fit, but we could certainly explore that question.
Yep, I made a note of that too. I know that there have been laws about not adding to property values if it's like a rooftop solar for a residential house and things like that. But I don't think that's applicable to commercial solar development. But as Jay said, we will check in with the assessor on that.
I guess I've got a question about both the light industrial and the rural designations. On the rural side, part of the long range plan that we've talked about involves preserving some open spaces and trying to have a network of open spaces. And I think that would be a focus in the rural areas. Is there any provision in here, or what's the thought process about kind of how to balance that with these sorts of developments? And I think I'm on board for the proposal in general, but I know there are right of ways and trails and things that open through undeveloped lands on the rural side of on the turnpike side of town. Would those be preserved? Is there a mechanism to preserve those sorts of current informal uses that are current informal natural open space uses that are currently in play?
So if you look under the standards portion of the language in section C, natural resources. So reasonable efforts shall be made to protect wetlands, watersheds, working agricultural lands, mature forests, surface waters, and slopes greater than 20%. So it is in there. We want to, preserve our high value natural resources. Trails aren't specifically mentioned in there. We can adjust that. But I think that, as Jay mentioned, some of this land, if it's agricultural land and if people are looking for revenue sources, are they going to sell it off for house lots or perhaps develop it into a solar array? Solar is a much lower impact, much less strain on the town's resources. It's silent. There's no odor. So it's kind of one of those things that can work really well with the natural environment, especially because it's unlikely that people are actually going to go in and cut forests for these. They're usually the agricultural lands that are already kind of fields and things like that. So this does try to preserve natural resources and work in conjunction and in harmony with the natural environment. And like I said, we can add trail systems in there, and trails can easily be moved in some cases to go around the solar development.
Yeah, you don't need to sell me on the idea. I think what I'd just say is some mention of existing right of way or existing recreational access may be appropriate. Again, whether it's snowmobiling, whether it's walking, trails, etc., those are a valuable part of the open space that has not yet been developed on a lot of these lands. So
Understood.
I'd encourage that. I'd encourage the sustainability committee to think about that.
Great.
If I could, Peter, just on that point, before as we transition to another thread, I just want to sort of make mention, if there's existing formal easements or rights of way, those certainly would be preserved, right? Because those are executed. If it's sort of the informal, we'll certainly, I think it's a great idea for us to look at, but there are certain limitations that the town has to require private property owners. If someone's been nice enough for years to allow people to go across, but then decides to say, hey, private property, you can't do it anymore. But I think the point's well made and certainly something for us to look at.
Yeah.
Alan?
Yeah, two things if I could. One, or I should say before I say anything else, I am definitely in favor of this type of power generation. So I don't want people to think that I'm not with my comments. But I have a real concern about this being placed in either industrial or light industrial areas. And my thought process there is we are so strapped for that type of land right now that the thought of taking 5 acres for 1 megawatt of power generation just doesn't make sense to me, because we don't have enough industrial space now. And in terms of light industrial, God, I'd hate to see us take some of the light industrial space that we have right now at the Downs and use it for solar array. I just don't think that's the appropriate area. Secondly, my thought was, what discussion, if any, was there in regards to bordering around this type of an array? Or excuse me, not bordering, buffering. I'm sorry. Has there been discussion about buffering, and what are they looking to do in terms of buffering?
Yep, there is language in there about buffering. So there are minimum setbacks, and then they do need to comply with the buffering requirements in the town zoning ordinance.
Okay.
And then there's also, they're required to fence it in, which they would anyway, and there are certain standards that they need to meet in terms of fencing as well, so that it is consistent with the other fencing requirements in the town zoning.
Yeah, I saw that. I'm looking at the more of the visual aspects of it.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and these are typically, because of the scale, they're kind of out of sight more so. I think they prefer to be inconspicuous and well buffered. So, but yeah, there are requirements within there.
Jamie, do you know how much power is generated at the array up at Colby College? That's a huge array.
I don't off the top of my head, no.
All right. I don't know if anybody's ever seen it, but if you're driving north on 95, off to the right-hand side of the road, Colby has a huge array up there.
Alan, I just want to address the other part of Alan's question about the industrial land. And, I think it certainly bears looking at that a little bit, but I think Jamie in her memo talks about the fact that doing the arrays is less valuable than actually building a building if they could build the building on the site. So I think the arrays would probably go on the less productive acreage within the industrial areas, but it's certainly something that maybe Jamie and I can take a little bit of a look at, in terms of the market and make sure we understand that. But I think the idea is the need for building would, Jamie, the affordability of this better, but I don't think you'd see an array alone going into the innovation district. I think it would just be too expensive for them. But I'll let Jamie answer that as well. But I just wanted to focus on that industrial piece.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head, Karen. So it's usually the less desirable land within those zones. And Jay and I have talked a bit about this, and we're batting around the idea of setting a minimum lot size that for this type of development, specifically within those zones, that may get at, it may make it very limited in those areas. If you need a minimum of 5 to 10 acres, for example, and that land will be more valuable to be developed into a building as opposed to a solar array. That is at this point in time where the majority of the infrastructure is. So if there is a piece of land that isn't that is zoned industrial and there's not many uses for it, it may make sense for someone to develop a solar array on it.
Hey, Don, then Marvin.
Go ahead.
Don?
Yeah, I defer to Marvin, and then I can go after him. If that's okay, Dave. Thanks.
Hey, Marvin.
Thank you, Don. Thank you, Dave. I am stuck at sort of square one. I wasn't here a year ago, obviously, and I'm all in favor of solar. Yet, there's no yet as far as solar is concerned. I'm looking at the memo and I'm seeing that in the second paragraph of background that the expanding solar development in Scarborough aligns with the goals outlined in the town's draft comprehensive plan. And I need help because I went to the draft comprehensive plan and I found the word solar once there on page 134 in no relationship to solar development or this type of solar farm utility scale. So it seems to me that and I'll stop shortly and expect to be corrected immediately, but it seems to me what this memo is suggesting is that the comprehensive plan should align with the language in the memo, and it currently doesn't. And then on page 2, benefits of solar development, the first of the 5 bullet points is also supports priorities outlined in Scarborough's draft comprehensive plan. If I'm correct, I would very much appreciate from the Sustainability Committee language that they would suggest adding to the comprehensive plan in order to align the comprehensive plan with these statements that currently, again, I'll stop, are at best inaccurate, So I can't get off of square one that way. And if I were to be forced to, the specific question I'd have about this idea, particularly in rural farm, following up on the idea of assigning lot sizes, would also be, my question being, has there been any conversation, and if there hasn't, I would suggest there be, about establishing overlay districts in rural farm areas, again, or particularly where viewshed is sensitive. So those are my ideas. Did I miss something in the comprehensive plan more generally about utility scale things, energy development that wasn't specifically solar? I'm sure I may have. Jay, can you help me on that?
Sure, I'll start. Jamie, you certainly chime in. Certainly the Sustainability Committee has reviewed what's in the comprehensive plan. But there is, I would say, Marvin, you sort of hit the nail on the head just as you were closing there. The statements are more general about energy efficiencies and sustainability. So, it doesn't say specifically solar or wind, or I think, and that is, as we've talked about with the comprehensive plan sort of stays at some level at that higher level and talk about more generally. And then as people dive into the details, you figure out, well, what does that mean? And in this case, right now, solar is sort of the prevailing concept. I would imagine technologies are, as we all know, technologies are changing all the time, and who knows, in a few years, there could be some other type of system that comes along. So I do think when the memo talks about a tie, and Jamie wrote the memo, so she'll correct me where I go wrong, but a tie to the comprehensive plan, the language is more general. And obviously you noted that, in that it doesn't say anything about large scale solar, however it might be framed. So I think that, in my estimation, is the connection.
My only addition to that, and I appreciate that and understand it, and I stand corrected. I do know about the more general approach, of course, and not the prescriptive approach. A plan is a plan, and I would therefore be very interested, if it's at all feasible, to have the committee, the Sustainability Committee, please provide the specific references, at least as far as a page is concerned, that they are referencing when they mention that it does align with the draft comprehensive plan. Where in the plan does it? And I don't expect this memo to have that, but I would be very interested in reviewing that very specific, those very specific points to make sure that I am on the same page. Generally speaking, I'm on the same page, but I'd like to have, again, with the idea that this is a plan, that the Sustainability Committee idea of what the plan says aligns with what I understand it to say as well. please,
So-
if possible.
If I can jump in, on page 161 of the comp plan, it says, under the increased energy efficiency section, it recommends updating ordinances to encourage renewable energy.
You said 151,
161.
161.
Jay, on this point for Marvin, I think you're right in terms of the generality, but if we are engaged actively before the comprehensive plan has been, the new comprehensive plan or revised comprehensive plan has been released, if we know that there has been a specific ordinance that is doing this, particularly for utility scale solar, which is a large amount of land usage, it may be appropriate to just have a call out box or a paragraph somewhere in our discussion on sustainability or something to indicate that the town is proceeding with this. So I understand I'm on board with you on the generality of the plan all day long. It's just telling that there has been an actual change in ordinance, or assumingly a change in ordinance during the time of the plan's construction that wouldn't be mentioned.
Yeah, and I guess I don't know that I want to make well, if we're comfortable with I think a call out box or a paragraph where we're not sure where this is going to go, and frankly, don't know if the comp plan gets adopted before, right?
Yeah.
We're pretty close to kicking this out of committee, I think, within
Yep.
very short order. So I think at some point, the town is able to do two things at once. I don't know that the comp plan, whether there's, I think we can do it if the committee feels like there should be some more acknowledgement about this concept. I think, the one that Jamie just flagged sort of on 161 there, we can make some, brief knowledge that, this, I can't remember what the statement was, but we could add something to the effect of this may mean solar, wind, sort of.
Well, what I'd say is, or even just as simple as, for example, utility scale
exactly.
solar development.
Yep.
That'd be
So
great.
if the committee
So-
feels that that's the type of language we should be looking at, we can do
Yeah,
some little.
there is a call out box already on 134 where it's mentioned, and it would be as simple as just saying including utility scale solar generation. It's listed as solar power, but we could be slightly more specific there.
Yeah.
Seems that we've talked about it. I mean, I would certainly be in favor of that to be a little bit more, and it would just be a couple words.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. That is the place where solar is mentioned, the one place, and the scale of it. It's being mentioned there is solar power, heat pumps, better insulation. That's an entirely different range of scale than what the memo is proposing. So I think I would agree with you, Dave. I think that if some adjustment could be made there, I think that would help everybody all the way around, just the average person reading the comprehensive plan and finding where in it this idea of large utility fields is referenced, I think would help avoid future difficulty.
Great.
Hey,
Take a look at that.
Great. I agree with the discussion, and the points that were made, particularly as they pertain to the fact that there are competing interests, right? We have a limited amount of land left, and there are a lot of demands, for the uses, and also a lot of options in terms of energy. So I think that the work that Jamie and the Sustainability Committee has done is great to get solar, on the page. It's clear it's got to play an important role for us in helping to address climate issues. So that said, I still think, and this ties back to some of the most recent discussion with Marvin and Peter and others, how are we going to solve for that? The thing that's missing for me is saying how, what percentage do we have today in terms of solar? What is our expectation longer term? And I know these are specific goals and targets that probably don't belong in a comprehensive plan, but we need to refer to some process by which we'll be evaluating that and monitoring that. So I just wanted to, just reinforce that point. I don't have a solution for it, but I think there's that's a need. Otherwise we, run the risk of, I think, putting all of our eggs in one basket and, even what is the profitability today, or what the expected profitability of solar versus geothermal, or all the other options. So at that point, the other point is that, we are going to be making trade-offs here. I mean, we still have a fair amount of rural space in Scarborough that's rapidly disappearing. There are hunters and fishermen and that sort of thing. So there are other uses like that, recreational ones. And there are also impacts that I've read in recent articles of solar on having an effect on our ability to develop sustainability in terms of raising our own, crops and harvesting our own, our own resources, for the food supply. So I just want to make sure we have an eye to that, and we're not just, saying solar, over everything. So just sort of a cautionary note. But I think the statement is well written, good work by the committee and by Jamie. It definitely needs to be in here. But we're going to have a big job managing the trade-offs and the balance.
Jamie, a question and a couple of observations on the draft ordinance. Is this based on some other ordinance, some other town, or what have you?
Yeah, I looked at a lot of different towns' ordinances. There are many towns in Maine that are allowing this type of development now. This one closely mirrors Kittery's. It seemed pretty applicable to us as well, and straightforward. I looked at Portland and South Portland's as well, and Rockport's, and a few others. And Kittery's seems the most realistic. And then the surety section for when these systems are decommissioned in 30 to 50 years after they're developed, that language is similar to our transmission tower language. So those are the requirements for when transmission towers are installed.
And I assume you have or will get input from cities, towns' attorneys on this?
Yeah.
One of the things where, Rick, if I could just jump in on that point, one of the things that Jamie and I have talked about, and where this fits into the ordinance, does this become a performance standards like our transmission towers? Is it a standalone ordinance? So we really just wanted to say, are we good with these provisions before we start spending attorney dollars on it? And Rick, I'll yield it back to you here in just a moment, but I did just want to, before we get too far away from one of Don's points, was about how the town really needs to think about how much solar, and and I just want to remind us that we do have an energy and sustainability plan. And obviously, as I said before, the technology is changing a lot, and I know our sustainability committee sort of circles back to it quite frequently. And so, Jamie, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, or if that's enough said, and we can get back to Rick. But I just wanted to sort of remind us all, because there's so many parts happening that it's so.
Yeah, and just one comment on to that too is these developers, in addition to being kind of at the mercy of the town, they're also at the mercy of CMP. So CMP is only taking a certain number of these types of developments on an annual basis, and it kind of, where you are in the pipeline depends on when you get your stuff into them. So I don't see a huge boom happening with solar in Scarborough. We just know that there is interest by both residents and developers to make this happen, and whether those projects are going to move forward and at what time frame, that's a huge moving target because of constraints, largely with CMP, but also because we currently don't allow that type of development in town. So there are a lot of unknowns at this point.
So the other observations I had, the draft ordinance uses the phrase solar energy system or solar energy systems as initial caps all over the place. I'm not seeing a definition. Are you intending to have a definition in the ordinance for what those are? I mean, obviously you've got to define it. You've got a term, initial caps, totally undefined.
Yeah, I think
so that's just a glitch, and you got to fix that. You can't have initial cap terms undefined. So it'd be a good idea to decide exactly what those are, The other observation is I think it's a little risky, a little dangerous to have standards that read reasonable efforts as determined by the planning board. We really need to have more objective standards that a developer can understand and meet. Otherwise, and again, this may be the town attorney's call, not mine, but as an attorney representing a developer, I cringe every time I see ordinances that talk about reasonableness as determined by a bunch of citizens whose personal views may differ. And therefore, you open the town up to lawsuits based on what's reasonable as determined by the board. So I would encourage you to try to come up with more objective standards on A, B, and C under the standards for utility scale, ground mounted solar energy systems. And the last thing, just comment generally on our role in these things. I mean, I'm all in favor of solar energy, wind energy, energy from water dams, and try to get rid of as many fossil fuel based energy systems as possible. And I'm all in favor of this, but I do think that this committee needs to be a little careful about seeing itself as the council and ups and downs on these things. I've always understood the committee's role to be, like in this case, the town wants to adopt an ordinance. It's our role to try to vet it for language and how it fits in, not necessarily, what we feel about it personally or as a committee, because it's not our role to vote on these things. But in any event, those are my observations and a couple of soapbox statements.
Rachel?
Yeah, I thank you, Rick. That's what I wanted to talk about too. There was some a few what I would call wiggle words in there, which asked the planning board to figure out what our opinion is without some backup from current ordinances, current or future ordinances, without giving us the appropriate guidance that we can use to base a decision on. So I do appreciate that. One of the other things I noted was that structural change for this is applicability C that materially alters the size, placement. What does materially mean? Is that 2 acres or 1 acre, or is it? I just don't know. So I would suggest the closer you can bring something like that to the ordinance, the current ordinances, the better off certainly the planning board is. I do suggest that if you're going to go forward with this draft proposed ordinance, or talk to the ordinance committee about any thoughts that you may have, as you start talking about natural resources, please add vernal pools. Under security measures, one of the conversations that the planning board had this Monday night, we did put really what we issued was an advisory opinion. We did not approve anything. We issued an advisory opinion for the town council. Under security measures, please include a Knox box so that in case there is some sort of an emergency inside the area, the fire department can get in. I'm sure that would be requested by them pretty fast as well. So I did have one question under the benefits of solar development, and that's the very last bullet. May boost productivity of agricultural lands by increasing pollinator habitat. You could really tell me what that means? It does not follow immediately.
So there have been studies done that show that when solar arrays are constructed and when wildflower meadow mix, seed mix is planted with them, it actually can boost productivity of agricultural lands by as much as 20%. So providing habitat, pollinator habitat in conjunction with the solar array construction, and if they're in proximity to agricultural lands, or if a landowner has decided to convert a portion of their agricultural lands to a solar farm, they have seen an increase in their agricultural productivity.
Yeah, then I suggest you say that someplace in the body of your memo,
Okay.
because there's really no connection. And remember that if land really is tight, the landowner is going to be mowing around the solar array so that the brush doesn't grow up too high and cover the array. So, you know, there is maintenance that's involved. Now, what came before us basically showed around the buffer in some cases where where a pollinator of the meadow mix was used. But I would also caution about saying it's not going to cut down trees, because actually the array that came before us on Monday, there is one area where there was some uplands and there are trees on it, and they are going to cut down those trees and to make sure they can get to the 4.99 megawatts. So there are some freestanding areas, more or less, that circle around wetlands, and that we asked them to ensure that there was some protection for maintenance, some protection for the wetlands to be added. So there's more to be, certainly more to be looked at, but in general, the planning board was quite enthusiastic about seeing the proposal before us, and look forward to seeing more with appropriate guidance. Thank you.
Jay, do these projects go through site plan review?
That is the process. We'd have them go through a planning board review. Yes, so
Under the site plan ordinance, right?
we would, yeah, we need to figure out how to get there, because as you know, and a lot of you on the call who have been on the planning board, a lot of the site plan review provisions aren't very well applicable to this, you know, traffic, there's not. So yes, it'll be a planning board review. We need to figure out sort of, again, that's that next step once we're good with the provisions.
Right.
But really, they're going to be looking at these performance standards that are built in here. I think is really what the planning board's going to do, similar to what we do with the transmission tower thing, where they have a certain set of standards they're looking at. So,
Right.
Yep, we'll get there.
You then, Corey? Peter?
On mute, sorry about that. I just first off, I'm in favor in general with the intention behind the memo and the change in the ordinance. I would just kind of go back to Alan's original comment on sort of the light industrial and industrial zoning areas. One thing, and to Rick's point, our job is not to approve or deny an ordinance, but our job is to be the voice of the comprehensive plan in helping the town council and other committees understand the impact of a proposed ordinance change. The comprehensive plan has a specific place and actually a prominent place for ensuring that we develop our business capabilities as a town, or the locations for businesses and allow for business and industrial development in town. We don't have the same strong call out for power production or for utility scale production. And so I just, again, on the rural side of things, I have very little concerns, just my concerns about potential recreational or traditional right-of-way usage. But for the light industrial, I'd go back to Alan's comments, and I am concerned that, you know, I understand within those areas there are less useful lands. There are blocks that will probably never be that attractive to site a light industrial facility or warehouse or whatever you have. But I think the plan implies a much more strong desirability of use for that type of use within those zoning frame areas than a utility scale solar plant. So I'm not sure how to incorporate that in. I don't want to use this to stop the ordinance. I just want to kind of back up at what Alan was getting at on that and mention our concerns.
Okay, Corey, I think, yeah, we should probably bring this around to a conclusion, but go ahead, Corey, what's
Sure. My comment was actually going to be on that general topic on Alan's concern about the industrial district. And as Jay said, we did have a conversation about this a year or so ago, and I remember Alan raising that concern, and we had a little bit of discussion about it at the time. And I guess my feeling remains that I don't see an issue with allowing this in the light industrial districts as an option. I think it's just one more option for development and economic activity in those areas. It's not as if we're mandating it or proposing to really try to overly funnel it to those areas. But I think to a great extent, I always hesitate to say these words as part of a planning committee, but I think to a large degree, the market will sort of help drive what happens there. If there is such demand for other types of warehouse and other light industrial uses in those areas, then that should be what percolates to the top in terms of what gets developed there. But I think I see no issue with allowing for that as an option. And as has been pointed out, that's where a lot of the infrastructure is. And so I think there's some logic there. I think we have to be intentional about, as we've talked about with housing and other uses, we have to be really conscious and intentional about proximity to infrastructure. So I think there's a way to do it in a balanced way that allows for that possibility in some of these industrial zones, but also allows it in the rural farming areas. As Don has pointed out, it's going to be a moving target, and the town's going to need to be intentional as well about sort of monitoring as it goes along, because the technology and the markets could look very different in a few years. But I'd hate to see the ordinance prohibit this type of use in the industrial districts. But I definitely support it. Thanks.
Yeah. So it seems we have a laundry list of comments and feedback here to work with. Generally support, but there are some fine tuning that needs to take place and some additional language. Anybody else before we try to move on? Okay, Jay and Jamie, is there anything else that we can add to support your going forward here?
I was just going to mention, I think as far as next steps, Jamie and I and Jamel, who's on the call as well, Karen, will sort of get together, we knew we had some further refinements to do that. Probably then at this point, I'm starting to feel we're putting the meat on the bone. So probably run it under the attorney's nose and sort of, figure out how it fits in the ordinance, and then really start to percolate this through the formal process, with council and whoever else gets involved at that point. So I don't know exactly what that's going to look like, what exactly form that'll come back to this committee, sustainability committee looks like, but I think we're sort of at that point of moving forward.
And I just want to thank you all for your feedback. It's really helpful, and we will definitely incorporate the suggestions that you provided. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie.
Great work.
Good
Thank you.
work.
Enjoy the rest of your meeting.
I was going to say, you're free to go, Jamie.
All right. So Jay, next item is more comp plan edits.
All right, so I think Karen and I are super excited. We feel like we're down to the nitty gritty here. We did, and just before we jump into the nitty gritty, we have already engaged with the person who helps us locally sort of fit all our edits into Indesign. So that's underway. We know that we have a few more things here we're going to talk about, but so things are starting to move, and it feels good, I got to say. So I'm going to pull these up. And I'll share them on my screen if that's helpful for folks, just sort of in the order that I have them in the email that I shared. So,
yep,
because that's what I have up. So that's, it may not be sequential, but that's all right. Let's see. Seeing my screen at this point?
Yep.
Yes.
Very
Right.
good. All right. Karen, you want to lead us through this one? I think you were the chief author. I think we had spoke about this through the process, but go ahead. And you're muted.
There we are. Yes, so we had received several or a few suggestions from the library board that we incorporated into page 80. And page 80 was really describing the library and what's been going on. So they asked us to, or they wanted to add a couple of edits regarding where they are in the process right now in terms of they've been doing a lot of analysis and working with architects and engineers about potential additions to the library. So this is really more of a data information. So where you see the red, everything in black is in the plan. The red is the addition that they've asked for. So we're running that through you. We did make a couple of edits just to make it, work with the document, but it was really more taking out a few adjectives and things like that, just to make it read a little bit more like the rest of the document. But basically, they've added some couple of places where about the services that they offer. And then the last paragraph really talks about where they are in the process with respect to the new building. And again, this is language suggested by the library board.
Seems like we're done. I don't know if you know your hand's still up, and so I don't know if that's on this or if that's a holdover from previous.
That was a leftover hand, so you can put it down.
Fair enough. Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Nice to have extras.
Karen,
Yes.
if I could suggest an edit in the paragraph in 2006, when you get a little further on, the needed expansion has been deferred due to circumstances, then I would say such as
Okay.
recessions and competition with other public priorities, such as, and then go
Right.
from there, because I think that's what they're trying to say. Also in some of their edits, very few people use the word amongst anymore. It's simply among
I thought
the
we cut some of
technology.
those, but
And that's all I had.
Rachel, I'm one of the people that continues to use amongst, so I apologize.
Well, no, that's okay. It's still acceptable.
Still in a dictionary.
It's still there. It's just falling slowly out of usage. There are other terms that are falling out of usage that which I can't immediately think about right now, but I know I keep saying, well, that's a perfectly good word. I don't know why people don't use it anymore. But
well, in the spirit of trying to make the document sound like it's written by one person, I think since this may be the only place we see amongst, I think we can eliminate that.
The general comment about the in 2006 paragraph, and that is, it certainly isn't the 35,000 foot view. It's very specific, and at least as I read it, it may not be saying something that terribly specific when you dig into it, but it's the balance of the language of generality versus specificity. And I suppose my comment is, I'm not sure if we need this much specificity. I understand why the library wants it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, it really is up to the board to decide. So we just wanted to bring it forward since that's what they requested.
So, I mean, I kind of agree with the point. It is more of a position statement and, more of sort of, it's more argumentation than maybe typical, and maybe Rachel and others have a view on, the suitability of that. But I mean, I kind of get what they're trying to do, trying to update their plans and acknowledge that there are other options than they've had most recently. But I don't know if that's, if this much is needed. I get it, but.
If this is what the library board wants and we're giving deference to what other organization and groups want, then this is what they get. If I were to really dig into it, I would condense it considerably because they constantly refer to the services that they offer, even though they use different languages. In terms of technology, the high-speed T1 line, and then the next paragraph says the same thing. If there's a space issue, I would be happy to try and help them condense it a little bit. But if this is what they want.
I think I'm happy to, I think we're happy to take the concepts and reduce it around. I reduce it a bit. I think that there is a certain amount of detail that is perhaps not in other areas. So we can certainly do that. Is within the purview of the committee to say it doesn't match everything else.
Yeah, agreed. Peter?
On that note, yeah, I'd say I think the concept in the 2006 paragraph is important, given that the library is already engaging in public outreach and the town is expecting to expand the library. But I agree with both comments. It does feel like we're giving too much advertising time to very specific items here, instead of the concept that the library is currently engaging with the town in an effort to examine future options.
Okay.
Right here. Yep.
Okay, so we'll work on a little bit of language refinement, but otherwise generally satisfied with direction.
Yep.
Okay, I'm gonna take us to another page then, unless I hear otherwise. Which brings us to 149. So let's see, I think this was one we talked about as a committee actually quite a bit. I think just at our last meeting, and we felt the changes were significant enough to just bring back to you. So hopefully you're able to follow the bouncing ball as to where the changes are supposed to go here. And let's see, I think Don, this was the one that you had some comments on. So again, what we tried to do is just before I turn it back to Don, I think that the major points we're trying to get to was, this was an area that we felt there was a lot of specificity around, the growing facilities, and hey, look, we have the new public safety building already built. And then some of the other details. So we, again, tried to zoom the microscope out just a tick or two. So we don't lose the general points, but that that it is, sort of in keeping with expectation. So hopefully we've done that. Karen, I don't know if you want to add anything else, since I think you helped.
No, but we may want to pull Don.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak at this point. I don't want to go way off the page on it, but it did seem to me there was an opportunity for us to make the point that, we are going to try to keep pace with expanding needs, but we want to do that in a certain way. We want to try to balance that with expanded services, facilities, I think, is the wording, but also making sure that we, are looking at ways to consolidate and be efficient. I think we've been a leader in the area in terms of our taking on providing services to neighboring towns and that sort of thing. So I think that's an important principle we followed and have had good success with that from a number of different measures. So I just thought we could draw that out a little bit, and there maybe is perhaps another place in the comp plan for us to make a similar reference. You know, we understand and accept the need for expanded services, facilities, and so forth. Yet at the same time, we don't balance those with preferences of the citizens and our ability to provide these services in a way that's economical and efficient. So without that, I think we run the risk of making commitments that making promises we can't keep.
On front, I like the language that you had. I thought that was really effective. So I'd be in favor of including that, Jay.
And Don, I guess the question would be, I think we can tweak the first next step to incorporate. I think the first next step is talking about, let's understand the impact of growth on services. And in that, we can refer back to sort of the idea of surveys and understanding the fiscal impact as well, and make sure that that's spelled out in that first next step. Oh, mute.
Sorry, the surveys, just to be clear, we haven't done one in a while. We've done one a long time ago. There is an expectation we would do another one potentially. So that's current discussion. So it may not be something that's, we can make a commitment to specifically, but there is a current sentiment among the council, and this will be verified publicly at some point, but there's an idea to kind of validate that with what the public feels we should have.
Really, what I'm seeing
we do that from the standpoint of allocating funds as a council, but we haven't really done a survey in a while. So I'm open if you feel it's really going too far, referencing a survey.
My general take is I applaud you, Don. I support both your paragraphs. In particular, I support the second one. The first one is almost too general. It somehow goes over my head, but I get it. Second one, I think, has meat on the bone, and however you edit it or reduce it, or I don't think it needs to be reduced. But I support, appreciate your effort there, and I think it helps define some qualities that will benefit the plan. Thank you.
Yeah, as I looked at your comments, Don, it seemed, as I read them, and I need to think about, the first one certainly seemed to fit very well on this page. And I think that second one, there's another spot, and it's in I don't know exactly what pages, but that sort of concept is there, but I think you articulate it well. So we'll, if folks sort of think that we should try to incorporate some of that language, I'll find that space and try to embed it there, because it seemed like it was, again, that second one to me seems a little more about, more general than just the public services piece, where the first one, so.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, I defer to your judgment on that, Jay, but I felt that there was a way to kind of reinforce that theme elsewhere in the comp plan. Thank you.
I'm good with that. Anybody else to wrap this one up?
All set.
There, all right. Whoops, what'd I do? Okay. So this was kind of fun. When Karen and I went through the list of things to do, Karen's name came up a lot. So Karen, why don't you take the lead on this one?
Sure. So this is just really updating, the information. Basically, we did pay off the Enterprise Business Park TIF this year. So even though the TIF ran longer, our obligation under it is complete, and it has been closed out. So we're really down to Higas Parkway, the BOR as 2 economic development TIFs, and then the downtown TIF. And the associated credit enhancement agreements. So that's what this attempts to do, is to clarify or to correct or take the enterprise business park out, and to give a little bit more definition on the downtown TIF district.
Karen, I just, when I got this, I didn't understand what the stuff in the upper left-hand corner was where that was going to go, or.
Let's see, TIF districts, I believe that's going to go where the enterprise business park, right in front of the enterprise business park.
Okay.
Replace where that paragraph is.
Got it.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's not correct. See where that gap is? The town currently has active economic development TIF districts. That it goes right there.
Okay. Once you drop that in there, I just take a look at word, the verbiage and word that. But okay, that makes sense. That makes more sense then. I appreciate that. I just didn't understand when I saw the page.
Yeah, I didn't put an arrow. I should have put the arrow there. Left the gap, but didn't put where it went.
Silence is golden.
Yeah. Continue.
Great.
Yeah, no, and I think it's great to be able to include that update. Congratulations.
One down.
Good
All
work.
right. 151. So subtle change, we just wanted to bring it back to your attention. The Land Trust, if you remember, gave us a nice letter with lots of recommended changes, and a lot of those have been embedded sort of throughout. But this was one that we wanted to bring back to you all, just to really highlight, because I think it captures one of their main elements about talking about, because the plan as currently drafted really talks about parks planning. When we talk about developing a plan, it really talks about developing a parks sort of active recreational. And we sort of have passive language about open space planning and those sorts of things, but they really want to sort of codify that. And so really these next steps are really about sort of a more, about an open space plan. So it's really just embedding some language to be a little bit more explicit about that idea. And then with the Land Trust, offering to be a partner in that, we wanted to be sure we recognize that they're local civic organizations. We didn't want to sort of exclude if Friends of Scarborough Marsh wanted to be part of it, or the Eastern Trail Alliance. So sort of, again, just broadening and, recognizing, that the Land Trust is out there, but there are other potential partners as well.
Marvin?
Appreciate it, Dave. My comment here is going to be reflective of not only this edition, but generally speaking. I'm opposed to words like maybe. It's too nebulous. I would suggest something such as are effective tools to address the following. I like clear declarative sentences, and I think this is a good place to practice that. Thank you.
Fair enough.
Peter?
Yeah, I'm very much like the addition of that sort of opener. I think Marvin's got a good point on the use of a more clear verb than maybe or maybe. The question I had is on our do we have an development of an open space plan as part of our sort of intermediate or long-term goals that we in the chart that we put together you guys put together a few weeks ago? And I just want to review that chart, the revised version of that chart, to make sure that we've got a clear statement about that. I think it makes sense. I think if we added it, that would be a good idea, but just it goes in line with saying an open space plan in capital letters on this page.
Yeah, and so thank you for that, Peter. One of the things that we're undergoing is ensuring that all these changes that we're making now are reflected back in the driving successes. So we are working on that. So this is one of those that would be reflected back there.
Great. Okay.
Thank you for highlighting that.
Rachel?
Yeah, let's see, the 1, 2, 3, 4th bullet down has left me very confused. It says increase new and strengthen existing accessibility and management of the town beaches and the marsh. So we're increase new accessibility and management. What's being increased? I guess the word new in there is.
Yeah, I think this is about, if I had to suggest, this is really about trying to find, it's really about new accessibility to the town beaches. Trying to find additional ways for the public to access the beaches. So yeah, sort of the increased new is an odd phrasing. So we can take a look at that. But I think again,
develop new could be develop a
Yep.
increase doesn't make sense. So develop new and strengthen existing accessibility and management.
Yep.
And management procedure
Okay.
programs. It's some sort of it's a program that you're increasing.
Yeah.
I guess, or developing. So it just it's a little strange. So
Yep.
yeah, you can work on that. And then on the first column, second paragraph, third line, fourth line down, Scarborough residents have long expressed the desire to have a community center built in town, with many expressing a desire to include a pool. I would just simply, instead of saying and many, just simply with many.
Yeah, that whole first part of that paragraph is a little disjointed, it appears.
Yeah.
Jumps topics a little bit.
Yeah, actually, I was gonna, and you've got the rest of the page is really about open space planning, not about a built center. I'm not saying that there isn't a place for a discussion of the built center. It's just that it ends up appearing very disjointed. I agree with Dave.
Yeah, it's kind of a laundry list of wishes.
Maybe we can massage that a little bit. Don?
Yeah, I agree with the commentary here to kind of tighten up a little bit, but it does touch on this point of trying to enhance, but also create additional opportunities for people to access open areas, the marsh, natural areas, and beaches. So beaches are mentioned here. So I don't mean to kind of go back to something we talked about before, but I did take the time to look at the old comprehensive plan, and there's a whole section in there, and maybe this is from the action planning part of the comprehensive plan, but there is reference in there and wording to, like 3 pages on marine resources. And I know probably marine resources, don't fit exactly here, but was policy, chapter 5, policy objectives and actions, D, marine resources, our vision for Scarborough's marine resources. So, I mean, maybe this is just a function of my being on shellfish and coastal harbors, but I think this is an area that, needs, and maybe it doesn't fit here, but it just flagged for me a need for us to kind of revisit that. And I'm happy to do this offline, with 1 or 2 others, but I think there are a couple of things that are not in the current update that, should be included someplace. And I just, there's one quote, I think it flags that the language that that Rachel highlighted. And if you bear with me, and I'll get it on my screen here in a second.
While you look for that, if you don't mind, I just it's been obviously some time, but we did the marine resources piece. There is one section in this comp plan about marine resources. In one of the meetings we did a few years ago, like we did with all the committees, I went and met with the coastal resources and shellfish committees in a combined meeting. And we went through the 2006 plan and sort of help embed what's in our marine resources section of this plan. And I know we sent the revised language along to them.
So
But-
I'm referring to objective D3, maintain and the existing public marine related facilities and access points and expand the number of access points and facilities when feasible. Now, here they talk about things like boat ramps, launches, but it also includes in instances where use of existing public access points or facilities is impeded, clarification of property rights need to be addressed so this goes down a bit of a rat hole that I don't really want to take us, but this is going to keep coming up time and again. Maybe not right away, but it will be facing it again. So the fact that it's absent, in our update, I think is a bit of an issue. But again, it's maybe just sort of my own personal issue, but I'm not sure we've covered that appropriately so far. And part of it is beaches, but part of it is this broader statement about public marine related facilities and access points.
Don, if it just, and yeah, I think maybe we can take this one offline. Certainly other committee members want to chime in, but do take a look at page 137 of the current comp plan. And then I think you and I can chat a bit because there's a page in there about marine resources. So
Great. Well, we can do that, Jay. It'd be much more efficient, but I just figured I'd take the time to mention that. Thank you.
And
I just want to, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Peter.
I just say, Don, I hear you. And I think I agree. We need to beef up that discussion, but I think on this page, I just want to focus on 151 for a moment. This page should just be limited to recreational or access or personal access stuff. I just want to make sure we're clear on that one.
Thanks, Peter. Thank you.
I can't resist approaching one of my pet peeves about the comp plan generally, and that's these little stickers that are applied on certain pages. In this case, bottom left corner, healthy. My only 2 cents are, if that paragraph that we've been discussing, beginning Scarborough residents have long expressed, needs to be expanded, I'm all in favor of getting rid of the healthy sticker. Thank you.
So Marvin, just an explanation of those stickers is those refer back to the principles. And I think at one time we were trying to make sure that, we listed those principles up front, but did we implement the principles as we went through the plan? So there was an attempt to go back and put the 9 principles in the various places. So that's where that sticker comes from.
Karen, I very greatly appreciate that. I understand it too.
Oh, okay, good.
I knew I was opening a can of worms. I just couldn't resist. Thanks.
Maybe they could just get smaller.
Right.
You know they're scratch and sniff, right, Marvin?
Or a bite out of the apple, maybe we do that.
There you go.
I like Dave's idea of smaller, frankly. I think that's a good idea.
Yep.
All right, we good on this page at this point? Okay.
Yep.
Let's see what comes next. What did we just do? All right, 99. Okay, I think we talked about this first part up here previously. So we're just sort of making a call out box about, that the boundaries of the conservation growth map are general. So that language is going to be more pop. But one of the things we want to do, because we know, and I know we talked about this at the last meeting, but it continues to be a concern, and we're hearing from folks about really being sure that we're clear on what we mean by growth sectors. And that, because if you remember, just a quick backdrop, the conservation and growth map is broken into 2 areas. Growth areas, which have a laundry list of sectors underneath it, and limited growth areas with a couple of sectors under it. What we want to do, be sure folks understand, and this is what this paragraph is intended to do that we're seeing in green, is that all those sectors under each area umbrella have very different meanings and different expectations. And those are sort of broken out in the pages where we give the brief, paragraph description of each sector. And so this is really intended to state that again. And again, sort of echo the fact that, yes, villages are under a growth sector area, I'm sorry. But really what those growth areas are about is not just about growth in it's really meeting sort of the state's terminology of growth. So it doesn't mean more density, more houses. It really means sort of priority investment areas. And so that could mean in the Higgins Beach area, looking at, resiliency planning. It could mean looking at, looking at the public infrastructure. Whereas in North Scarborough, it could be looking at, a rezoning that talks about different densities. And so really, again, codifying that each time we go through sort of a planning process, there is going to be a fully vetted community discussion around what the general parameters of the comp plan mean in actual articulation and implementation. So that's sort of where, that's a long way of saying these 3 sentences.
Jay, I appreciate that. And the one suggestion I would make on this one, within some sectors, there may be some areas that are already built out, comma, and would not anticipate further commercial or residential development. And then continue, however, there may be still opportunity for public infrastructure investments. I think that will serve to quell a lot of the concerns that we hear from folks like the Higgins Beach people or folks in Pine Point or things like that. The idea being that, you're already built out, but you'll still want to have some public infrastructure investment. And if you were a limited growth area, you wouldn't get that. So, so look at this as a use of definitions defined by the state's requirements, not by the English language definition of growth.
Yep, I think that's a nice add. My thoughts anyway.
Yep.
I think you navigate a delicate area well here. In the green type, I'm sure you've seen infrastructure needs a U between R and C there. But I'm sure you'll catch all of those typos.
Yeah, what's really fun is when you type into, at least the software I'm using, as I'm typing into PDF, everything gets a red underline. And so it just becomes this, I gave up on worrying about spelling mistakes because I'm like, you know what? Bert's going to actually type this in. So, but yes, thank you. It does make the eyes sort of glaze over. We try to capture them, but thanks, Margaret.
Yes, and I want to say that I do appreciate people making a distinction between government language and the English language. There's frequently a disconnect there. I wasn't involved at the beginning here, so as I'm looking at the conservation and growth maps, the first column when it talks about Oak Hill and Dunstan, why is something else not mentioned? What was the discussion about that? Because when you mention 2 things, then you're saying there's nothing. You're kind of saying there's nothing else. If you say, for example, then people understand that there is more. So as I look at it, there's certainly the Downs is important to our growth. So I'm just not clear how we got to just those 2 places.
Other than that's how the author drafted them, I'm not sure it was there was a whole lot of committee discussion around, this level. Again, I think they're just trying to provide examples of the areas that are being talked about.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it says that lays out to somebody saying, well, how come my area isn't there? Or what, does that mean we don't get anything in terms of growth? Or does that mean what in terms of services? So I just think that it's needs a look at, so people in a town center that isn't mentioned don't start to worry that something's going on.
Yeah, perhaps the IE is replaced with, for example.
Yeah, that would be, I think, better, because then people don't worry that they weren't mentioned.
Great suggestion.
Thank you. And also, Jay, just so you know, when you say the designation of growth and limited growth areas serves, the designation is the subject of the sentence, serves, and it's singular, serves is the verb. And you have that someplace else down below. No, and a couple of little grammatical tweaks that I'll get to you.
Great. And I did notice, actually, one thing this highlights, the word Planapalooza still shows up here. I thought I did a search and destroy as we talked about the last meeting and called them community charrette. So I'll be sure that gets replaced on this page as well.
Good catch. We were going to pounce on that in a minute. So good catch. just kidding.
We got them on a few pages. But anyway. Okay.
We are at 9:30 and I know I would like to.
Two more.
Two more. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, I'm moving. Here we go. Okay, looks like Karen, again, you're going to take the lead on this one.
Talked last time when we were looking at the community profile. We look at long-term trends, but we're in the midst of trying to assess what the impact of COVID-19 has done to national, state, and local economies. So this is an attempt to say, this plan is looking at some long-term trends, but we know this is happening right now, and so we want to acknowledge it. The importance of this is to say, this is something that there's some real questions that we don't know the answers to, but we need to step back and ensure that we're incorporating whatever happens over the course of the next year or so. We're tracking it and we're understanding what those impacts are. So I think what we say in this page is, we went into this with the economy fundamentally strong at the local level. So how fast we recover and what we need to look out for, these are the types of things that this page is really trying to address. And so we did talk about a couple of the aspects of what was happening at the local level right here.
Yeah, I got to say, Karen, when I read this, for me, I really liked how you positioned that, look, we think we're fundamentally strong, this COVID thing, we need to keep on top of it. So I thought that was well done.
And in the next steps, we already had some strategies that talk about, we need to monitor and really come up with key performance indicators. So we'll need to be doing that for COVID.
Peter?
So just two comments here. First off, I really like the page, and Karen, I think this was excellent work, really excellent work. Could we just have a footnote at the bottom saying where the sources of all these statistics
are? Sure, absolutely.
And then in the K-shaped recovery, you mentioned two good examples would be Hannaford, Abbott. I'm not sure we should qualify good. Just two examples or something. To say that they're good might be the town is endorsing them in some way, rather than just highlighting them.
Yep.
But otherwise, like I said, I applaud the effort. This was really well done.
Right, Rachel?
Yeah, it certainly meets meets the need I had when we talked about how to pull this out and how to focus on some of the issues that are ahead of us that are kind of unknown at this point. I do have some changes, the specific words here and there, Karen. I don't think they changed the intent.
Okay,
Should I just call you and talk
Sure.
through it? Okay, if there are a couple of questions of tenses, and it's
okay.
those small tweaks that can cause people's eyes to glaze over.
I think I know the
As they're
sense you're
trying to-
talking about because I
Get
struggled
out
with
here.
it.
Yeah, so, okay, I'll give you a call and we can just run through it. And I
Sure.
think it really does point to the issues facing us and some of the unknowns, and that's good.
Okay,
That's helpful.
Marvin?
Thanks, Dave. Great layout. Terrific to look at and to read. And I have I'm sorry to be this serious as far as what I'm about to suggest. But I think, generally speaking, in the plan, of course, it does not address the homeless. And COVID's had a big impact, I think, in this way, bringing more homeless to Scarborough. I know we have floors of motels where they're being housed right now, multiple motels, and I think there's an issue also with where they are when they're not in the motels. I think the homeless need to be included here. I think this is a perfect place to include them, and I know that's a big job. So those are my that's it.
Okay. Marvin, I would add that as in the second paragraph, we talk about all of these questions that we don't know the impact of, and we can add that, as a question. This is really part of the community profile piece.
Well, I think I would suggest you can do even more than that and find out a little bit of the current data, since, I mean, the only disadvantage of the impact of COVID is that COVID will pass sooner rather than later. It doesn't feel that way now, and this will become a dated page. I don't think we're going to lose the impact of COVID, though. And I would like to see a little more data about the current state of the homeless in Scarborough.
Wait, thanks, Marvin.
Take silence to be
Okay.
golden again.
Yep.
All right. Last one. All right, what do we do here? I think this is me. I can't pawn this one off on Karen, darn it. Let's see. Yeah, so this is so last time, or maybe 2 times ago, we had a host of changes around pace of growth and growth management and those sorts of things. And one of the things that's come up in a recent discussion with council has to do with this notion of right now, our growth management ordinance, we sort of have this fractionalization of permits that some might be familiar with. And there's a concern that might cause a misperception in the community, where we say, hey, look, we have 135 growth permits, and people might think, well, that means only 135 new units could come online at any given time. And there's really an interest in seeing growth permits equal the number of units. And of course, there's a lot that needs to be discussed on the policy level. So I'm not trying to direct the policy level here, other than to include language that talks about really looking at, if we're going to look at the number of permits that are eligible in the town, can we create a differential between how many single family units can be developed within the number of permits that are allowed, as opposed to how many multifamily units could be permitted? State statute around growth management is very explicit in that you can create differentials in between how many permits you issue in your limited growth areas and your growth areas. And our ordinance currently does that. As I talk through the issues that council is debating and discussing with the town's attorney, I said, well, okay, statute is very explicit about that type of limited growth and growth areas, but what about this idea about the types? And state statute silent on it, and there's no litigation to turn to in terms of the growth management provisions of state statute. And so the town attorney said, look, so long as the comprehensive plan makes some passing acknowledgement that this might be on the table for consideration, that would sort of give the town, if it wants to go that policy direction, the ability to do so. Doesn't mandate that we do it, doesn't require that we do it, but it sort of enables if that's a policy directive we want to go. So that's really what this third bullet is around doing. The first two bullets, again, bullet number 2 here is again about that growth and limited growth area that we talked about and is already in our ordinance. And really, again, the first one's about trying to direct most of our growth to our community and regional activities. So I hope I was somewhat clear in that. If not, I'm sure you'll ask good questions and I'll figure it out as I go.
I get the intent from our perspective. Yeah. So
That description was very helpful, Jay. I think as you see it laid out on the page, there might be better ways to express it. I was confused in reading it, but what you just described made perfect sense.
Yep.
So I'm not sure how to improve it on the fly here, looking at the language, but what I think you said is that on the advice of the town attorney, to the extent that the town council might wish to create a differentiated permit structure for units versus permits in growth and limited growth areas, we may explore the opportunity to do so. That was hard to read in what came out in that second green paragraph is all I'm saying. So yeah.
Yeah, I do apologize for the layout. I sort of figured there might be some difficulty trying to.
Yeah, but what you're saying makes perfect sense, and I get where you're trying to go with it, and I think it's a good thing to include. So yeah.
are we gonna find a lovely spot, a lovely picture in Scarborough for this page?
Yes.
Yes, that was one of the Karens.
I logged on last week to the ordinance committee meeting, and they reviewed growth management in some detail. So I know I was influenced by that. And these are my 2 cents, and they're only my 2 cents. And I have no idea if it's even appropriate to bring this up, I'll beg ignorance, being a new member. But I have a suggestion, and I have no idea if it's possible. And that is, after listening to the growth management conversation at the ordinance committee meeting, I came away from it hoping that Scarborough will see its way clear to depoliticizing the permitting process in such a way that it may be possible for the town council to establish annual permits numbers in doing a lot of due diligence, regardless of whether they're growth permits or building permits. I mean, I understand the subtleties and the importance of them that way, but I'd very much like to see if the plan could say so. It advise the town to establish growth management in a definitive way on an annual or however often basis. I don't mean to tax the council, of course, But I'd hate to see the council get into the weeds of allowing developers to appear before them and beg, pardon my language, for a permit. I think it takes us down a really slippery slope. And those are my 2 cents. I don't know if that can be put in, and thank you for allowing me to express myself that way. Does that make sense?
It's like Don wants to chime in, so.
Yeah, I was just going to add, Marvin, that's a good call out. I would say we're wrestling with this because there will be a proposal forthcoming. There's something that's been done on a video, and I think that's what Marvin referenced from the Ordinance Committee reviewed last week. So until we finalize that, I think this language is subject to be revisited, but I'm okay with, where it is right now, with that caveat. But we're going to have something that hopefully will be clearer and will simplify, and will address some of the issues that have been raised in the past about fractionalization of units and other aspects of the GMO.
And I think, Marvin, I'll just sort of chime in. Certainly, that's what we've tried to do with, the dozen or so enhancements that we've made coming out of the public forums that we had back in March and in December, where it was identified that this notion of growth management and pace of growth was sort of a blind spot in the comp plan. And really, the level of detail I think you're talking about is the next step, right? Because we currently have a growth management ordinance that says there's only so many permits in a year, and it talks about how those are distributed. So I think sort of what you're talking about is that next step item, not so much a comprehensive plan item. That's my feeling on it. But, and that's where I think here we're trying to stay at that high level, say, okay, let's continue to think about it. What's right? Because frankly, Don well knows that we're here, there's different thoughts. Some saying let the market bear. Don't worry about it. Others are saying, no, we should. And I guess one last piece I'll mention, Corey, I saw your hand go up there. I just want to note that state statute also, there are certain standards we need to follow following state statute. And, I don't need to take us down that rabbit hole for this meeting. So anyway,
Yeah, we could easily get into the weeds here on this discussion. So let's try to bring it around. Corey?
Yeah, just very quickly, and obviously we're focused on the comp plan here, which is and so it's understandable we'd be looking at it through that lens. But I just want to, point out for everyone or remind everyone that LRPC will continue to have the ability to weigh in on these things going forward. I assume, at least in sort of the typical advisory way. So I think it's perfectly appropriate to kind of keep things general in the comp plan, and how the policy actually unfolds going forward will be sort of a function of how the council handles it, and presumably the council will continue to ask this committee to weigh in on that as appropriate. So I don't think we need to put too fine a point on it for purposes of the section of the comp plan.
I agree with that 100%, Corey. And Jay, you have arrived at delicate language or good language to describe a delicate situation on this page. And I only wanted to throw an even more delicate issue out there in case there's some subtlety that might be able to be added very generally. And again, thank you for allowing me to air my view. Appreciate it.
Thank you all. Yep.
that was the last of the documents that we had.
Great.
We do have one member of the public on, which I think public comments next. If you're ready for it, Dave.
We have, if anybody would, I guess it's Allison.
Yep. Let me push the button here. There we go. Allison, you should be up.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I won't take up your time. I know you're running late on the Higgins Beach issues, but I do want to thank the Jay and the long range planning for being so responsive to the concerns, not only of myself, but I know a lot of my neighbors down at Higgins Beach as well. So I thank you for your changes. I look forward to seeing everyone's comments incorporated in maybe the next round. But one thing I did want to mention is in listening to the conversation about the utility scale solar farms, that is there a concern like we had with the marijuana ordinance that, you know, there's so many different areas in town that constitute the RF district, that would a solar farm be appropriate in all of the RF areas? And from listening to the marijuana discussions, I think, you know, the answer might be, well, the utilities or the people who are developing the solar farms would probably be looking at the more affordable parcels of land to build the solar farms. But so if but it still would be allowed everywhere in the RF, I believe, with the way that the draft is written now. So perhaps there's some consideration to that. Maybe if there's an overlay district that would solve that problem, or perhaps if there is, you know, the thought of rezoning RF, so the parcels that are really more residential revert to being rural residential zones. So I just wanted to throw that thought out there, and thank you all again for your time and your consideration.
Thank you. Okay.
Jay, if I could just make a brief comment for Allison on that one. That actually cuts to the core of my concern about the natural resources stipulation on the ordinance. So again, I'd encourage the sustainability, I know Jamie's left, but I'd encourage the sustainability committee or our comments to the sustainability committee to consider that as a way of preserving the right character of rural developments which occur without necessarily going down a very complex process of overlay districts or rezoning or things like that. So I think that's a way to, if they can find a way to make that natural resources section written appropriately, I think you'll address a lot of concerns in a very elegant manner. So, but I appreciate Allison's comment. So thank you.
And I think I'll just, Peter, if I could on that, I know that's one of the things that Jamie and I have certainly talked about, and I don't attend the sustainability committees, but one of the things, and no answer here, just sort of things to ponder as we move forward, is recognizing that where we're saying these solar utilities can go, we're also saying development could go. So if we sort of get too restrictive on solar, we may not see solar, but we could see rooftops. So I think this sort of gets to the more broad conversation about an open space plan, right? Sort of. So, so anyway, just.
No, exactly, Jay. And which is why I thought it was great that the open space plan came up on the active living page. I think that plan could help us address a lot of these issues in the balance of development,
Yep.
whether it's homes, whether it's home businesses, whether it's solar, whatever. So agreed.
Jay, before, and this is not on that subject, but before we say goodbye and before you feel too good about approaching the end of the road, and I'd be pleased to chat with you offline about this, but I have two large considerations for what the comprehensive plan might address, or at least they seem large to me. And 3 weeks ago, I asked, how do you bring things up at the meeting? Do I contact you privately? And you said, no, you bring them up. So I'm just going to throw out two things. And one is flood zone restrictions, and the other is stormwater regulations. And I know that flood is mentioned many times, flooding many times in the comprehensive plan, but I don't see any addressing of specific restrictions for the flood zone. Maybe that's not our purview, but I think it should be addressed at least at a 35,000 foot view. And then stormwater, of course, is all over the place. But again, the word regulations not attached to stormwater. And I think those are large issues that are going to be with us for decades. And I'd like to have a chat with you I'm probably wrong again about what the comprehensive plan may have overlooked. But before it's closed down and written in stone, I'd like to have some discussion either at the next meeting or otherwise with you offline, Jay. Is that all right?
Sure, happy to do that. I know there are, certainly you've seen there's quite a bit of discussion about stormwater in the comp plan, as well as sort of resiliency and those sorts of things. So yeah, I'd be happy to talk with you, but I do, sort of to your point, these are committee decisions. So, this is any so I think this is a good point to sort of talk about, as, again, you're sort of talking as a committee and as a body. So it's really about where the committee wants to take the plan, and certainly as individuals, you have, your own individual abilities and civic responsibilities. But so there's that sort of balancing, but happy to have that conversation with you. And if you have specific language to bring forward, that'd be great too.
I very much appreciate and understand you're describing the committee. I think my question was, is it ever appropriate in this plan, and this is to the committee, to be a little more specific about flood zone restrictions and not just flooding, and more specific about stormwater regulations? There's a lot of description about stormwater, but I don't find a lot of places where the rubber meets the road. And I'm not the one to find that. And my question to you, Jay, was, before you close the book on this, would you and staff have time to review those two issues and to better assuage my concerns and maybe the committee's concerns? As I said, they may only be mine.
Be happy to chat with you.
Thank you.
Yep, I'd recommend that. And if there are specifics, then we can certainly discuss them as a group.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Dave.
Okay, I need to get going, so I'm hoping, is there anybody else here? Yeah.
Real quick, just Jay, what is the next major turn, and what is the pathway from here?
So at this point, staff, Karen and I, Jamel, we feel like we've sort of everything we talked about coming out of the forums in the fall, we've gone through the checklist that the committee had laid out for us to work on. So as I said, what we see and we're hopeful to have is very soon, our sort of edit person is embedding all these changes into the Indesign program, that we will have a comprehensive revised a fully revised comp plan brought forward to you with all these changes. So we've, the hope is that when you see this, we've hit everything that you've asked us to do, because we've tried to go through page by page and incorporate committee comments and all the edits. And I do want to remind you that, so we're going to get this revised plan from our local person, but then we're also going to send it along to GP Cog, who's going to do a full copy edit. So we got at least 2 more independent sets of eyes looking at this for all sort of the little nuanced things that are great to catch.
I guess Jay and Dave, then both, what should our next meeting date be? Is next Friday relevant, or should it?
We already have something scheduled, don't we?
Yep.
Yeah, we've already got something scheduled for next Friday, but what will that consist of? Will there be anything to really do?
Yeah, so I guess the hope is that we'll have the revised plan potentially early to mid next week. If not, we could always postpone that meeting another week or so. So yeah, I really see the sort of the next thing is bringing the revised comp plan to this committee, and having the committee deal with it and issue it out of committee if you see fit, and up to the council level. And we could talk about.
No, Jay, I'm just thinking the work volume you described. I'm wondering if that's maybe too much to get done for next Friday. And especially for us to review the entire document before that meeting,
Mhm.
maybe we schedule that and we do in fact decide today to defer and we just have our next meeting on the 12th.
I think that seems pretty reasonable to me, because yeah, it is going to be you're going to get 160 odd pages of stuff. So again, and I also want to be clear, one of the difficulties with InDesign, we're not going to be able to, when you get the new document, all these changes aren't going to be highlighted where they changed. So we are going to, I've been posting all these single page things on the comprehensive plan webpage. So for those that are are meticulous and want to go back and see where things were and how they changed, you'll be able to do that. But page numbers are so really I'm hopeful that the work that we've done over the last 3, 4, 5 weeks, it's really about here, it's all been incorporated, and where do we go from here?
And I just propose the other board members. I think that makes sense then to defer the next meeting to the 12th and give us all a chance to review that as it comes out and give us ourselves the chance to read it as a comprehensive document.
I have a
I'm fine
question.
with that. We
I'm
really
fine.
need to wrap up, I think.
Agreed.
I'm fine.
Sorry, I'm not, I'll defer to the chair.
There's going to be a lot to review, so I'm wondering if it's really, it's going to take us a couple weeks of committee work, I think. So if we could get it, if it comes out midweek, we get started on it right away. If it doesn't come out, then we postpone.
Yeah, I think what I can do is, I think probably next Friday is too soon, quite frankly. So why don't we just plan on deferring that meeting? And what we'll do is once we get the revised plan, then I can send out a doodle poll and we can find an appropriate date to meet again. Does that make sense? I mean, typically our first meeting is the first Friday of the month, which would be next week, but that's, there's no problem with us rescheduling when appropriate. So I think that's maybe our best pathway forward. That way we can determine how much time we need.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, all in favor?
Thank you all. That
Thank
was a
you
great
all.
meeting.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Jay.
everyone.
Nice
Have a good
weekend.
weekend.
Thank you, Jay.
Thanks a
Bye-bye.
lot. Great meeting. Thanks. Take care.